So, okay, so, first of all, I guess I've been in education for close to 23 years now, I guess. I started out as a science teacher. My husband and I lived in Minnesota at the time, and I was hired as a 7th and 8th grade science instructor, taught mainly the life sciences. And so this is definitely my happy space. I always told Mr. Toppin when I needed to get a pickup, I would come up here and just soak in all the science stuff that he was doing. So I taught that. I taught science for probably, let's see, 3 years, and then I went into administration. I was at a really small school in central Minnesota, and we had a lot of turnover. Hi. We had a lot of turnover, and it kept getting frustrated with that because it seemed like every year we had a new administrator in the building and we would start new initiatives. And so at that point, I decided to go into administration and with the understanding that I would stay there and just offer a little more consistency in the programming, because it was tough on staff to go to do something new every single year with new direction, new ideas. And so I did 2 years of administration schooling for my first master's, and then was a dean of students, was an activities director, and was teaching. So at one point in my career, I was doing 3 different roles at one time, so juggling a lot. And in Minnesota, you have to have 2 masters in order to be a principal. And so I went back to school after that stint and got my second master's. And then that's when I got my first hired position as an assistant principal in a larger school down in southern Minnesota. And I would really say that those experiences, I think, really helped me understand more the student discipline side of things and the attendance and just the student management parts of it. Once I did that for 5 years, then I moved here to Valley City and then got the head principal position and really kind of was able to take on more of that instructional leadership responsibility that comes with it, even though this position also deals a lot with behavior and attendance and things. I was able to add that next layer of instructional leadership. So over the course of the 23 years, I've done it all. I've done substitute teaching. I started as a sub before my husband and I were grounded. Then I moved into having my own classroom. Then I moved into activities director, where I was doing all the busing. Then I moved into administration, dean of students, and then I was an assistant principal and now a principal. So I've kind of covered all of those areas, and I think that's been helpful so that I can really understand what goes on in the field.
Okay. Okay, all right. I graduated from a little town just south here, Litchville. You guys ever heard of it or seen it on the map, right? It's only 30 miles south of here. And then I went to UND, and then I got my first teaching job in Zeeland, North Dakota. The interesting thing about when I got the job in Zeeland, North Dakota, half my friends thought I was going to New Zealand, which is probably not as exotic, right? Zeeland was a German, Russian, if you guys know anything about history, German-Russian settlement where they came from Russia to escape the programs that were going on, and they settled there and kind of made some very tight-knit communities. I spent 7 years there. In my 3rd year there, I had the opportunity to become a principal because they needed it. In a small school, you have lots of different roles to play. If you guys go into education, you'll find that you may be driving a bus. You're definitely going to be coaching or advising something and providing different supports that the school needs to make it run smoothly. I was there for 7 years. I coached 3 sports: basketball, girls basketball, boys basketball, and track for 7 years while being a principal. And I did some AD duties too at the same time. And then I went to Sawyer, North Dakota, and I started there as a full-time principal. It was really weird to go into a principalship and not have a teaching assignment at the same time. And that was a good run for me. I was there for 3 years, and then I had the opportunity to become a superintendent there. So I was superintendent at Sawyer for 5 more years, so 8 years total. Came back to Valley City as my folks were getting older, and I wanted to get closer to home where I grew up. And this has been a great community to raise a family, as you guys know, growing up in it. Maybe you don't see it that way right now, but it is a great place once you get different experiences. And gosh, this is already the start of our 13th year here. Mrs. Brandt and I started here at the same time. 13 years ago, I don't know where that went, but it goes fast, and here I am.
Tell yours, I'm still catching my breath.
Obviously, you know who I am, but I started in Litchville, North Dakota. It was my first job. Graduated from VCSU, started in Litchville. I was there for, gosh, the years. I'm terrible at counting the years, but I think this is my 15th total year in education. Probably already within about 8 or 9 in Valley City somehow, some way already. I mean, obviously had almost all of you. And so, yeah, still here at Washington. I don't know, still the biggest kid in the school, and yeah.
Okay.
I go abbreviated versions.
Yeah, right, and I'm sorry, I called Mr. Leake.
Yeah.
Flu shots
You're
at my
good.
school this morning, and kindergartners getting a shot without their parents is a little bit much. So I'm like, Mr. Leake, what time?
Yeah.
It's 8:30, and he's like, no, it's 8:40, perfect, you just
So-
bought me time, so that's
So I'm gonna
why
hijack you here a
rolling.
little bit. So far this morning, I've sent an email out to all my parents saying we don't have school next Thursday, when we do. And I told Mrs. Golden the wrong dang time for this. At some point, I gotta just call it a day, guys. This is not going well.
Okay, so you want how I got here?
Yeah, your journey into education.
Okay,
And she's not talking about the 3 sets of stairs.
cool. Okay, so I graduated from a really small town, McCluskey, North Dakota, population, I mean, I graduated with 13 kids. I'm a graduate of VCSU. I too subbed right away out of college just because I needed to pay some bills and I was newly married, that sort of thing. Fast forward, I did not work in education right away. I had about 10 years where I worked in, as a admin for a financial advisor in town. There weren't any teaching jobs available our first year living in Valley City, and you get comfortable, and it was fine. I liked it, I worked with great people, but it wasn't what I wanted to do, and so then you have to find a way. So then I came back, was able to get into Jefferson as a 3rd grade teacher my first year. I got hired 5 days before the start of the school year. So that was a little bit interesting. And I've been in the classroom either 3rd grade or 4th grade since then, and that's been about 12 years, I believe. And then this past spring, I stopped and then I did the Teacher Leadership Academy through NDSU. They came to Valley City, offered teachers the opportunity to work on your masters. It was convenient. I mean, I've got a few kids, and so doing it elsewhere wasn't in my realm of things that was gonna work. And then I stopped to check on a basketball game because I thought that's all Mr. Leake did in his office. So I'm like, what's the score? And then he said, sit down. What did I hear? Are you interested in the principal job? I said, well, not really. I said, I am not qualified because Mr. Miller was retiring. Well, one thing led to another, and pretty soon I was having the conversation about whether or not I should possibly apply, and that led to, yep, I'm gonna apply, and then I'm gonna interview, and here I am today. It's been a very interesting year. I feel like I'm drinking out of a fire hose. I love it, I do. It's just that there are challenges that you don't realize exist in the lives of such little individuals in town. And so it probably breaks my heart as much as it does anything, but it solidifies my second guessing at times as to why I'm there, because they need stable people, they need role models, they need structure, they need us. And if that means that I'm gonna vacuum classrooms before conferences, or I'm going to wipe noses or carry you in from the playground because you're crying, or I'm gonna hold you during a flu shot, then that's what I'm gonna do.
Thank you. All right, so we're gonna go to your guys' questions. Now, just so you guys know, I had a really hard time prioritizing these questions, so don't feel like you have to go in order. So you can kind of look and see what you really wanna ask. So where do you wanna start? Which end?
It's not Fred's turn.
It's that side, it's
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
I don't know which question I want to ask first. I didn't look at them. Okay. What are the pros and cons of your jobs?
I always tell people that my job, I have the absolute very best days, most of the time, right? And you look forward to, but what I tell them is, you know, my bad days are probably far worse than a lot of people's bad days. You know what I mean? I think the pros and cons are you get the extremes, and you get the best days ever where things are clicking, things are going well, and you just have a great time. But you also get the negative side of things in administration where you can't really pass the buck much further, and you've got to deal with it, and those can be stressful and difficult.
Go ahead, Mr. Larson.
All right. I'm just gonna jump on to one thing that Mr. Leake also said, you know, when the days are really, really tough, it's always, I mean, let's face it, the main focus of our job is all dealing with human beings, right? And oftentimes there's a lot of conflict, and sometimes that conflict in our roles, when you have, you know, a few hundred students that you're working with or whatever, there's always gonna be some conflict, and it's just about going to be daily. So you really gotta manage that and make sure that you don't take that personally, and that you're making good decisions, you know, and then you can live with your decision. You know, if it's a hard decision, you can live with it. A pro, like Mr. Leek said, is, man, I've never been one go, man, I wish 4 o'clock would get here. I've never had to do that one time. I'm usually like, shoot, it's 11 o'clock, it's 12 o'clock, it's 1 o'clock, and you're trying to get all these things done, and it's the best thing and the worst thing, because I think I'm like a junkie now for all this stuff popping around you. I mean, it's almost like an addiction that I need to have a lot of things going on, so it's hard to let it just settle and wind down and just do one thing and do one thing well. And the other side is, the downside is your family sometimes gets the short end of the stick, because I think a minimum day is 10 to 12 hours most days. And when you go home, you spend another hour, 2 hours, even just trying to catch up on the emails or whatever communications you have, or you got a parent to call or whatever. So your family sometimes gets the short end of the stick.
I would say for me, working with, you know, high schoolers, I feel that the pros are just definitely helping students, knowing that we have programs that help students after high school. That, for me, is what kind of drives it. You know, putting together dual credit opportunities and seeing kids walk across the stage when I know the effort that they've had to put in. That is just, there's just nothing that's more invigorating for me than to see that. Or the other side of it is maybe a student who's struggled, but then to also see that they've overcome that struggle and they have persevered and they've graduated. So that is, for me, one of the biggest pros. I would say for me, honestly, the con is pretty much everybody understands that we have a captured audience, because students, for the most part, until they're 16, they have to be here, but after 16, they're encouraged to be here. Parents make them be here for graduation and all of that. But with that captured audience of us having students, a lot of times there are outside organizations and outside influences that want us to take on, as educators, to take on a lot of roles and do a lot of things with students. And so I think sometimes it becomes this a little bit of a burden that we're expected to do all of these things for kids when we only have students for 8 hours of a day. And so I don't want to let anybody down, but yet we can't do all of that. And so sometimes that's a kind of a con for us. You know, if things are happening, then it's kind of, well, we'll have the school do it, you know, or we'll talk to the school to see if the school can help implement something. And that just becomes overwhelming at times for us, I think.
I would say the pro at my building is just the age, right? They're excited to be there, and you get a lot of hugs. They're not always clean, but you get a lot of hugs. And the cons, yeah, there are still behavioral things that go on, but some of them are so bizarre that they make you laugh. So my story from yesterday is this: I had a young man, got called to the office by the teacher, Mrs. Govan, can you please come get said child? Okay, so I went and got child, brought him back, and my question is, well, what are you here for? And this little guy, he's feeling bad, and his head is like this. And Mrs. Govan, I was just trying to mind control someone. and then he fell out of his chair. And then I accidentally lifted his arms above his head. And I'm like, what? If you're mind controlling, you know, so I'm trying to get this, like, so I understand what he did. So I'm like, so you walked up to a child, you bumped him out of his seat, and you put his hands above his head. That's not mind controlling, right? But he is as serious as he can be. And I'm trying to be serious. I am like, I got to think about what we have to do. I'm going to leave you sit here for a minute. It was because I honestly had to go laugh. I'm like, I don't even know what to say to him right now. I mean, so my bad days are I would say my bad days are sad days. Sad days when the outside influence of our world affects small kids. And what I mean by that is when I have to get police involved,
Yep.
and when I have to have a situation where kids are not with the people that should love and care for them the most. Those are sad days, which I would say are bad days.
And that is
There we
another
go.
expectation, yeah, you know, as soon as you get a call, or as soon as you need to be prepared to drop what you're doing, and you just have to go, and that's hard sometimes.
It's part of why I invited all of you on this.
Yeah.
Hoping we'd get a couple.
Knowing there'd
that
be some
could.
attrition along the
Yes.
way, yeah.
What changes have you seen or would you like to see in our schools?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Boy, if there's one here that could possibly, answer the changes question, but no. You know, that's interesting because I think you always start a job and you look at it, oh yeah, you come in and change all this and then you get a little bit comfortable, Hadley. And I think what's unique about that is we have to have the ability as leaders to just ask and seek out input from students, from other people on what those changes might be. Because I've been here for, I still don't know if it's 8 or 9 years, whatever. And you know, you get a little bit comfortable and you get a little bit of comfort set in your ways on how you think things should go.
Mr. Hagan, please call Dan Larson.
Sorry.
Yeah, and those type of things. So it's hard because I've been here long enough where, well, it's great, it's wonderful, I don't wanna change a thing, right? And I think that's a human element. But it's having that ability to seek out what others might think is a good idea and listening, not always agreeing, but listening and maybe adapting it for yourself.
Change is hard. Coming into a building where they've had the same leader for the last 18 years and you want to try to change something or in your mind make things more efficient or more streamlined, there's a lot of pushback, and not necessarily always by your staff, but by your stakeholders, right? I mean, I don't know, I probably have made social media, but I'm having students walk on the track until it's cold or snowy, right? To get some exercise before school. Why? Because there are parents in our community who think the school is also a babysitter. So they would like to drop children off at 7:30, have us care for them until school starts at 8:40. That's an hour and 10 minutes. Now, I know Brooke works at a daycare. You don't want to babysit for free for an hour and 10 minutes, right? So it's tricky. So you say, well, we're gonna try this, kids can get exercise, it's proven, right? There's statistics. Exercise is gonna help kids in class. They're gonna get a little of that squirrely energy out. That's change. And so then the backlash that you get, you have to have pretty strong or pretty thick skin, because of what people say and what people say behind. They can't ever say it to your face. I haven't had anyone come up to me and say, Mrs. Goldman, what on earth are you doing? But in other realms, they do, right? It's staff-wise, I would like to see staff get along better. I would like to see kids have people who are interested in just getting that kid to be the best version of themselves instead of passing some kind of test. I mean, not all of us have ambition to go to college. Not all of us have ambition to be a brain surgeon. But we should be encouraged to be the best version of ourselves. I hung up signs for parent-teacher conferences that could be conceived as snarky or rude, but they are gentle reminders to parents. Play games with your kids and beat them. It's okay, because many kids cannot handle losing and the explosive behaviors we have because of that. Well, then you find out, well, we don't play games. You've never played go fish? Like, you know what I mean? Like simple parenting things, or eat with utensils. Because if you walk through my lunchroom, the amount of students with their hand on their tray is disgusting. And so then I think, oh my gosh, if I send those kids to Washington and then he sends them up to the juniors and they're like, well, they're eating with their face in their plate, that's a social skill. That's a thing we can fix, but that's change.
You know, those snarky, like, subtle things you just mentioned with the signs, I feel like she was just talking about Mason right there. Oh, crap.
One of the things, you know, I do think that we have a very good building with a lot of really good resources, but as technology has been a big piece for us in our district, I feel like our space isn't real conducive of that. And what I would like to see is, you know, flexible learning more flexible learning spaces for students to be able to go. We've implemented a lot of flex time and we've offered a lot of options for students to earn privileges. I want to have nice places where they can go safely in the building to be able to study and just be able to, even just to chill for a little while, just to hang out and talk respectfully with people. And so, you know, that's a very low level change. High level systematic change, I think we have a really great system. We have great teachers. Our instructors, they care about kids. I would like to maybe see some more engagement and some more getting deeper relationships with all students, you know, just stretching that out a little bit, because we do have some students that don't get as much recognition and support, because they're coming from, you know, just other variety of different areas. So those would be the two changes that I would like to see.
What does your normal school day look like?
Oh, man.
I'll go. Okay, my normal day starts at 6:30, and that's just because I feel like the day isn't long enough, and I wanna get home and have some time. And I know some people ridicule that. Mr. Miller told me he was at school at 5. And he said, but I don't think you need to, Mrs. Goldberg. 5's a stretch. Not a person is awake at my house when I leave, which is a little sad. I leave notes all over. This person needs this, right? Because Grant's a little. Anyway, so 6:30 to 7:30, I've got time to do things on my, you know, organizational things, approve subs, that kind of thing. Busy work and uninterrupted, except for the janitor who has to talk about the volleyball game in Jamestown or those kinds of things, which is fine. By about 7:45, I'm outside at the track ready to greet parents and kids and organize some of that. There is no typical day though, because like today, I was the shot clinic girl, trying to wrangle in kids and make sure they didn't cry too long or that kind of thing. By 9 o'clock, we're ready to make announcements, and then my day is up to what I need what my teachers need from me. If they need me, I'm there. If I need to fill in a class, I'm there. And I'm making rounds to make sure that if first grade's supposed to be teaching math at this time, we're all teaching math at this time, because I think it's important that we stay in the same wheelhouse, because otherwise we're setting our kids up for failure, is my fear. So anyway, so I put on a lot of steps. Lunchtime, I organize kindergarten trays so that the cooks don't get angry. And then I go on the playground, and by the time you know it, recess is over, I'm back in the building trying to help Patty organize kids that aren't gonna get lost, because that's the fear at Jefferson. You're going to lose a kid on the bus, or the wrong parent's going to pick them up, and dealing with anything related to that. And then by 3:30, right now, 3 out of 5 days of the week, I'm in a meeting, which isn't my idea of a good time, but it's full. So that's what is happening. And then by 5:30, I go home.
It sounds like I'm sidestepping the question, but I don't, like, normal day, I think what you would maybe consider a normal day for me is probably the day I'm like bored and don't know what to do, because every single day there's just something unexpected, and you just roll with it, and that's fine by me. You don't know what's gonna come up. Shoot, as far as hours, you know, I'm there at about 7, and then, like Mrs. Goldman said, it feels like often at a meeting and head home when that meeting ends after school. But yeah, I just don't even know that I could define my more normal day, other than I show up at 7 and we'll see what happens today.
Yeah, I guess that would be where I would be at too. I am not a morning person. Everybody else on admin is, but I am not. I would much rather be here at midnight at night than to be in the morning. So I arrive around 7:30. And, you know, very much what they've said. A day is, you know, popping into classrooms, meeting with students, calling back parents, doing reports that we're responsible to do, writing grants that we want to try to get money for, different items. So lunch supervision then is, you know, we do lunch supervision. The afternoons, you know, it's whatever comes our way. But probably, like Chad said, there is no normal day, but just some of the tasks that you have to do, you fit in your days how they are. I do love to be in the front hallway and welcome kids back from lunch and interact with the students as much as I possibly can. My responsibility and Mr. Larson's responsibility is that anytime there's a home event, it's just a kind of an expectation that we're at home events. So, you know, sometimes our nights don't end until 9:30, 10 o'clock by the time we get things cleaned up. So, yeah, but if I didn't love it, I wouldn't do it. And so I love it, and I love watching our students. And so it's just kind of, I don't know, it's a great job. It's a great job. I mean, like I said, if we didn't love it, we wouldn't do it.
I'll tag on to it. She said, yeah, we do like, I try to do one stupid thing every day, like one prank or whatever, whether it's a stuffed dinosaur in the window or pick on one of the staff members, because it's just fun, right? And it is, it's fun, and so, yeah, there's a wide range of things. I know last year Mrs. Golden was teaching, I had this giant T-Rex, right, stuffed animal, kid brought in. So I'm out of, she got a big window on there, so all I did was, while she's up there teaching social studies or something, giant T-Rex in the window, looking around, and all the kids are like this, and finally she comes storming up. And I'm on my knees with the giant T-Rex. Uh-oh. So yeah, you gotta sprinkle that in,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's so doggone fun, it just lightens everybody's mood, and yeah, so that, yeah, it is fun.
It is.
It's crazy, but fun.
Mhm.
But she was really mad about the dinosaur. It was a fairly important lesson.
What happens when a fight breaks out? Is it like hard to stop them?
Mm. Well, fortunately, we don't have that as much. When Mr. Larson and I first came, I would say the culture in our building was not where it needed to be, and we had fights regularly. And so what we decided to do is we decided to respond to that by, obviously, one of the first things we do is we have our radios. We obviously call for backup. We want to separate the students, and then it starts the interview process of trying to get what happened, what's your perception, what started this, and you interview the 2 involved, 3 involved, whoever, and then you interview any witnesses. And so it's a time-consuming process, because then after you do the interviews, you gotta give the consequences, you gotta notify all the parents, you gotta let staff know what's going on. If there's plans that need, where students need to be split up, you gotta communicate that out. So when a fight happens, I see it as, it is a waste of my time. I should not have to do that, because it takes hours sometimes at our level. Maybe not so much at the elementary level, because ours can get pretty rough at times and involve a lot of people. So what we did to try to curb that then is we really took a stand that if you're gonna fight in this building, you're not gonna be in this building. And it was probably one of the best decisions Mr. Larson and I have made, because I think it settled the culture, and it's now created this expectation that you don't do that here, or you're not going to be here. So, and of course, there's various levels of fights. There's fights where people kind of bump up to each other and get in their face, but then there's fights where fists are flying and kids are getting dropped to the ground. So you have to use knowledge, you have to use common sense on where does this fit into, what's appropriate, what's an appropriate response to the behavior. But that's how we handle it. And then of course it's involving Officer Hagan. Typically if there's a fight in the building, somebody is gonna get a charge out of it. So might be both, might be one, however it goes, but they're going to get a referral to juvenile services for disruption of a public building and disorderly conduct. So.
And we don't have a lot of what I would consider fights, the knock them out, drag them out style fights. Ours, yeah, I don't know. Ours are like at recess from football, right? You got 2 competitive boys that don't really know how to lose or any of that type of thing, and they're, maybe a little push here or a reactionary, like, backhand type thing. And those are just, in a way, part of growing up, right? It's like Mrs. Golden said, it is like, we gotta learn what's acceptable, what's not, and those types of things. And I think it just depends on the age of kids. I mean, it's pretty rare, like I said, that we have the what I would consider a pre-planned attack or fight. It's the more spontaneous, I'm frustrated, I'm tired, and he was taunting me when he caught that touchdown pass fight. And so I think age matters, and I think you're gonna hear that.
Well, I would say out
Here.
of the, 65 kindergartners we have, they probably go home and say we're running Fight Club at recess every day, because they line up and it's like herding squirrels into the door, but if I let them all go at once, then but every day it's and there's nothing
Mrs.
happening.
Gregerson,
Yeah,
is Jalen Heisman in class yet?
no, she's not.
Okay, thank you.
So it's just bumping, it's this little kids who can't figure out life. I don't have fights. I haven't had any yet, so I'm lucky. Their fights are different, and you can't minimalize what they are thinking is important. I mean, I had a young guy, I think he really got in a big brawl yesterday, and he kept holding his neck. And then when I asked him to, I'm like, what happened? I hit a metal pole by the tree. There wasn't a metal pole by the tree. So then I'm like, well, let's look. And then when he moved his hand away, it was the same color as the rest of his flesh. I'm like, at least if you hit something, it would have been red. I mean, third graders have to know better. So, you know, fights, I don't have them.
Good question though, because
Mhm.
they do happen.
How do you calmly deal with angry parents?
That is, I feel like a skill that is just always improving with me. And like I said, over the years, I think right away I was probably terrible. Honestly, I probably wanted to get, I'm right, you're wrong type of mentality. And now it's turned into, well, I'll never be right in this conversation, so let me hear what you have to say type of thing. And I think it's just a mentality going into it, of knowing you're not going to, per se, win this conversation and those types of things. And ultimately, parents are angry because they feel wronged, right? And so just to hear their side of the story and what may have happened, what may not have happened, sure, you can think they're overreacting, but there's a perceived wrong. Hearing them out, sometimes making changes, sometimes subtly pointing out that maybe that's not how we do things, those types of things. So patience, and like I said, it just feels like, I had one yesterday, it just feels like it happens and you just get better at it.
I had a psychology professor in college. I didn't, I will be the first to say, taking away information from college, you hit and miss some of it. But I remember this psychology instructor, and I remember specifically where I was sitting even in the lecture hall, but I remember it was a definite aha moment for me. Because he said, when you're in an argument, because it was about conflict resolution, when you're in an argument, the louder the other person gets, the softer you have to get. And so I've really tried to practice that, because if you get, the psychology of when you're angry, your emotions are up here and you say things, there's just two parts of your brain that can't function at the same time. And so you become impulsive, you say things you don't mean. And so to counteract that, make yourself talk quiet. And then that just it shifts. There's some mental thing, and again, I don't remember all the details behind it, but there's some mental shift that happens in that forces you to be calmer, and it settles things down a little bit. And so I've used that in a lot of conversations that I've had to have with parents, but then also, I think, be willing to recognize when you're wrong. So if something did happen, to say, I apologize. If it's something that the school did, or an instructor did, or I myself did, be willing to say, I'm really sorry. If that was a mistake, I will be better. I will try harder. But a lot of times, that's all they want. They want to be heard, like Mr. Leek said. They want their complaint to be validated, and then that's when you can find a common ground and try to come to a solution. And I guess just practicing that. It does take time though, because man, it's easy, very easy to get defensive. Because, you put a lot of effort into your job, you put a lot of effort into everything you do, and then when somebody questions that or something, it's so easy to just get defensive. But just to kind of tell yourself, the louder they get, the softer I'm gonna get. And just listen.
Sometimes, depending on what it is, I feel like I almost talk like I don't have a pulse. Because I don't gain anything, it depends on the different kinds of things that you have. I mean, in their mind, their child is on this pedestal and you've wronged them in some way. You may know a different story, okay? But you have to let them say what they want to say. Right now, I guess I've had things in person, but I've also had things in email. Those are tricky because everyone can be an email warrior. You can say whatever you want behind a screen. That's fun. Those it's always tricky to reply to those. So I asked Mr. Leek first. I'm like, does this sound okay? And there, less is more. I'm going to give you a reply, but it's not going to have a lot of meat to it, because if you're not able to talk to me, then I don't think that I'm going to spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah, and usually through an email, I will simply respond, can we talk on the phone, or could you come in and meet? Because email is not a way to solve conflict.
No.
It's just not.
Even that is just lessons learned. Like I said, I used to think a good writer, I could craft this great response and fire right back at them. That was worthless, that was dumb, and so you evolve, and like I said, that's something that I think is just, you learn as you go, it's wild.
What do you do when a student starts noticeably falling behind?
It's a great question.
Mhm.
You mean like if we're at the track and they can't keep up?
Run faster.
Well, I'm lucky because we have a great team of people who are like attack that, you know what I mean? And they bring that forward, and it's not just the classroom teacher, it's the Title I teachers, it's your reading strategists, it's people collecting data, it's myself. I mean, anyone who sees a red flag, teachers are not afraid to ask for help. What is the frustration, I think, is sometimes the amount of time it takes for the proper interventions, help to be put in place. And some of those are legal things, some of those are hoops that you kind of have to jump through for different services. But I think kids falling behind, if it is, I think teachers, administrators identify it, but not always are the other people in that child's life willing to acknowledge it as well. And that's a hurdle that we run into. Because we might say, you know what, Johnny is really struggling with whatever. But whether it's reading or knowing how to sound out a word, and well, he can read at home. Well, that's amazing, because he doesn't know the first letter of his name. You know, so the disparity in the truth and what someone's displaying are oftentimes quite different.
And like I said, when it comes to falling behind in reading and math, that type of thing, Mrs. Govan answered that really well. But in school, 4th through 6th grade, ultimately, if you're falling behind grades-wise, your final grades, it's most likely because you're just not doing the work, right? You know, in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, if you're not doing the work, taking zeros, your grades are gonna suck. So right now, this year we started basically at 8 o'clock, Mrs. Govan opens up her room, for homework room, and anybody, we have a Google Doc, we're all missing assignments on it. It's very similar to ER, right? We just put it in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, and we're finding that now that kids are actually just handing in their work, even if it's not of the finest quality, as long as you hand it in, you're not falling that far behind on grades. And so those are little things that we've started this year. Mrs. Govan, I agree. You know, some of those other major things don't always happen overnight, and it's frustrating for us as well. But those day-to-day things on grades, you know, we're holding them accountable for actually just getting the work done, and that's an improvement over what we've done in recent past.
At the high school level, we kind of have a system in place where every 2-3 weeks, our teachers meet at grade levels. So the 7th grade teachers, 8th grade teachers, they all meet in their individual pods by grade level, and we review students who, you know, might be struggling or who we've noticed has a drop. And then within the grade level, they determine, is somebody gonna reach out and talk to the student? Is somebody going to hold them after class and just ask if everything's okay? Do we need it to go to a counselor? They'll ask me if I know of any family things going on, or medical things, or personal things, because in our world, sometimes when a student's grade drops, it might mean other things are going on. It might mean that maybe there's been a trigger for some mental health things. Maybe there's been a broken relationship. Maybe their parents had a fight and the student is now not living with both parents, or they've moved out of the house. Or, I mean, there's at our level, because kids are a little more independent, we really want to jump on that right away. And so it's just the importance of, if grades start slipping for a student, that's one indicator, immediate indicator that, oh, okay, we need to check in on something. Typically, if students aren't doing well though, it might be because they also just aren't doing the work, and so we would assign them maybe to ILC with Mrs. Egermont or Mr. Terry downstairs, just for a little bit of extra support. But you know, there's systems in place that try to catch that, and we do the best that we can, but we can't catch it all. Sometimes it's the natural consequences happen, and if a student doesn't engage, doesn't want to get the help from the instructor, doesn't want to talk to the instructor, doesn't want to take advantage of the help that we offer, doesn't go to ER, starts skipping that kind of stuff, then the natural consequences happen. And unfortunately, at the high school level, that's grades, and that means a redoing of a class or failing, and then we got to figure out what the next steps are. So there is kind of a catch, you know, there's a way that we're monitoring, I mean, we're all watching, we're watching what everybody is doing and how they're performing.
What's one of the hardest situations you've had to deal with as a principal?
Student death was awful, as you can imagine. It just completely affects every single thing happening within the school walls.
I would agree, and unfortunately, you know, we've had several at the high school, and, you know, death by suicide, death by accident, I mean, those are just, yeah, they're hard, they're hard.
I don't have anything that compares to that. I'm sorry.
Well, for our last few minutes, do you guys have any advice that you want to give them as they're deciding, right, what they might want to be doing past high school year?
Honestly, it is a great profession. It is a great profession, and I know that you might hear a lot of noise in the outside world about education, but I don't know of any business or company that has the tight camaraderie and community that a school has. I mean, we just are, you know, we call us the Highliner family, you know, we care about each other, but we care about our kids. It's awesome. And you get to be a part of helping the next generation be successful. And it's an awesome profession. I don't know, that's my 2 cents.
No, I agree. I think right now, there's just so much noise, and it's not just education, right?
Yeah.
But if you just listen to the noise in whatever you do, and you're not gonna like anything, right? And people love to share the bad things, right? And so just filter out that noise, and if you, I know some of you are working with kids, some of you are babysitting, some of you are all that. That's what you enjoy doing, go do it. Absolutely.
And get paid for it.
Yeah. Filter out the noise, because, you know, there's plenty of it, but everything that's happening here at home.
I would say that, you know, it's so great because you make a difference in people's lives every day, and not all professions can say that. You know, sometimes you hear people talk about their job, and you might, you know, for whatever reason, they might be going on fancy trips. School hasn't started offering fancy trips yet, but and you might say, gosh, that'd be nice. However, is their job as fulfilling? I don't know. I don't know that they could all say yes, because I don't think they are. And the monotony of other jobs, to me, would get boring. School's not boring. Like you said, you look at your clock, you're like, oh my gosh, the day's almost done. And there are days that are going to be more challenging than others, or there's the day before Christmas break when everyone's wearing their ugly Christmas sweaters and you're playing games. I mean, I don't know, there are just so many great things about it that I don't know.
And you will never find any profession or job where you're not gonna have bad days.
No.
I mean, don't say, I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, I always said, I wanna be a fishing guide, like, fishing guide would be stress-free. Well, then you start looking and like, well, what if you don't catch fish that day, right? You're gonna have bad days. And so don't sell it. Every single profession is going to have bad days, but you can't get hung up on those.
Do you guys have any last minute questions? Anything on there that you didn't get to ask?
What do you guys think makes a good teacher great?
Ooh, good question.
Ooh.
I gotta go, that's good.
Way to go, Hadley.
That's a really good.
Yeah, all right. Honestly, I think first and foremost is when it comes to academics and stuff like that, I think just about any teacher can be trained and has the ability to teach Johnny 2 + 2 = 4, right? But what makes a good teacher at that great is if he or she could tell me, like, all right, Johnny's got this going on, I can be there for Johnny, and I know that at 3 o'clock Johnny gets a little stressed because he's gotta go home and blah, 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 and you take an active part in knowing about Johnny and developing that positive relationship and knowing how to take the student from a good 2 + 2 = 4 academic student to a great student and help them reach their potential. that's what makes a great teacher, is how you take and develop those relationships to make a great human being.
Nurture those, nurture those potentials.
Mhm.
Mhm. And I would also, I would agree with what Mr. Leek is, but I also think great teachers also are very reflective on their own practices. Great teachers don't just teach one thing and think, okay, I taught it, students should have got the information, if they didn't get the information, they must have done something wrong. And great teachers will teach it, they'll analyze how the students did, and if the students didn't do well, they'll go back and they'll say, okay, what did I miss on this? I thought we all were on the same page, but clearly, I didn't present this in a manner that helped you understand what we need to do. So there's this constant reflection on themselves, I think, too, as how their students are performing.
No, I would say they're the teachers that don't just go through the motions. You know what I mean? Because anyone can be, follow the teacher's guide and it's pretty canned, right? Your great teachers are going to make it feel valuable to you. Great teachers in my world are the teachers who are not afraid to try something and have it fail and being okay with that and learning from it. And they're the teachers who are open, being flexible, and using the resources that are right here in the next room, asking for help, asking for an idea, and not being too proud to go to others for help.
I'd be curious what you think great teachers, what characteristics you think great teachers have.
Think back to who you remember
Yep.
and why.
Mr. Nielsen
Mr.
is
Nielsen.
probably the best teacher we have, in my opinion.
I don't know,
And
Mr.
yesterday
Leek
we,
played chess with me in the
yesterday in
hallway.
physics, we were talking about SEL lessons and all that stuff, and how we need to make it more of a priority, especially last month was Suicide Prevention Month, and we need to make that also more of a priority in the school.
So the characteristics are caring. What other characteristics?
Like being understanding, I think.
Yeah, like when you break your leg falling down a fire pole and you're caring for them, right?
You
Yeah,
didn't believe I broke it. I told you.
yeah. Mom and I were really good there, weren't we? Oops.
I think like when I go to school, I want a teacher who actually wants to be there and doesn't make it obvious that they don't want to be there even if they're having like a bad day. Like they still like pay attention and they teach and they care, and then when they have time they go deal with like their outside problems on their own, because sometimes it can get stressful to have your students dealing with your outside life.
I think making students feel validated is a really important characteristic.
When they go out of their way just to like say hi. All going around the circle.
You're good.
Next week we come back and flip this panel.
I know.
And this is great.
Yeah.